Hey everyone. In this episode, we recap some of our outdoor adventures from this past fall. We go into some of the highlights from my hunting season and talk a little bit about our fall endeavors. We'll cover the successes, the failures, and the way we think about things as we improve into next year.
That's right, Pat. So listen along to some of our wins, losses, and lessons from the fall season. We'll be covering the ins and outs of Pat's hunting trip this fall, so you won't want to miss it. Also, if you haven't done so yet, please make sure to follow us on Instagram and subscribe to the podcast so you can stay up to date with all of our outdoor activities.
All right, thanks for giving us a listen. And without further delay, let's get into the episode. Welcome to the East Coast Hunt, Fish, Hike podcast. I'm Pat Carroll, hunter, fisherman, and general outdoor enthusiast. Join me and my brother Mike as we share tactics, recount stories, and plan our upcoming outdoor adventures. Welcome to the East Coast Hunt, Fish, Hike podcast, your home for stories and tactics in the woods and on the water. I'm Pat Carroll, and I'm joined, as always, by my brother and co-host, Mike. How's it going, Mike?
Things are going well. Things are going well. We're into and we'll talk a little bit about this in just a moment. But we're into the almost the start of spring for us down here in Georgia, which is very different from you guys up north. I know that you guys have been getting quite a bit of snow, but we're doing well here, kind of transitioning from that from winter into spring, at least for us. And things are going well. I've had some opportunities to be able to get outdoors, and it's been things have been going well down here in Georgia. But how about you, Pat?
Oh no, things have been going here pretty good here too. Pretty snowy up here. Definitely colder than it is down in Georgia for sure. But in this episode, we're gonna recap some of those outdoor adventures we had from this past fall. I'm gonna go into some of the highlights from my hunting season, while Mike talks about some of what he has been up to this fall. We're gonna cover some of the successes and the failures, what we did, what we think we could improve on, all that good stuff. But first, I'm gonna push that social media like we always do. Please follow us on Instagram. We do have an Instagram handle that is at ec_huntfishhike_pod. So make sure you're following along there. That's where we're going to post about all of our recent adventures, things that we're doing, any new episode drops. We're going to put that there. And rate and review, please. Tell us how we're doing. It's the best way to move us up the charts, extend our reach to more listeners. Also, if there's something that you want to hear about, things you want to hear more of, things that we can do better, any of that is going to be helpful for us so we can cater to your interests. So please make sure you're rating, reviewing, interacting with us, leaving those comments, because that's the best way for us to improve the podcast and give you guys what you want to hear. So that's pretty much it from that front.
Yeah, for sure. Make sure that you're subscribing, following along, listening to us, and then also share by word of mouth as well. If there are people out there that you think might be interested in the podcast, make sure that you mention it to them, and let us know some of the things that you want for us to be talking about, and we'll be sure to get right into it. So yeah, spread us around. It's the best way that we can grow this community of people that are interested in outdoor sports like we are.
Yeah, very, very good. So, as always, we're going to kick it off with some of our most recent outdoor endeavors. For us up here in New England, things have been pretty snowy. It's been pretty cold. It's been, we just came off a storm where we got about 2 feet a couple weeks ago. And then this past weekend, we just got like another foot, and none of it's really melted. So there's just like feet of snow everywhere. It's pretty snowy. One of the snowiest winters we've had up here actually in the last like 4 or 5 years. So, which is, I mean, kind of cool, especially if you're into winter sports. And which kind of brings me into my next recent outdoor endeavor, which is skiing. So skiing, as you all probably have heard in the last, I think it was the last episode, Mike and I talked about skiing and snowboarding, kind of our winter sports fun we've had growing up. But I've been trying to instill some of that in my kiddos as well. So we've been trying to take them to some of the smaller mountains around here to get them up on skis. So we did have the opportunity to get out skiing first at a little local mountain up in Maine near my in-laws' house. Took the kiddos there and basically spent. We didn't go in with a lot of expectations of how it was going to go. But we did, rented some gear for them, got them up on the bunny slope. Now, the magic carpet bunny slope at this mountain is like tiny. It's like maybe 20 yards long. It's really pretty small. So it's like you take the magic carpet up, you kind of turn around, and you can go straight down this tiny little hill with like not turning, not stopping or anything, and not even risk like continuing down the hill. It's like really that small. But it was perfect for building the confidence in my two
Yeah.
youngsters. So my 6-year-old did a great job. By the time we were there for probably like 3 hours, maybe 4 hours if you include lunchtime. And by the time we were done, my 6-year-old was just basically doing laps, going up the magic carpet and going straight down the bunny slope all by herself, which was pretty exciting for me. My little one, she was doing a good job too. Either holding on to the poles and making her way down the bunny slope with mom or dad. So she was having a good time, but still not at that same level as the 6-year-old. But I mean, she's only 4, so she's still got some time to get there. But after having that success in Maine, we decided that it might be a good idea to try and kind of continue that success at a local mountain as well. So we went to another. This past weekend, we went to a mountain called Pat's Peak up here. It's a little bit smaller than some of the mountains that are up in the Whites, but it still has a pretty substantial amount of terrain and a really good beginner area. They actually have 2 separate kind of bunny slopes with magic carpet. So one was like the easy magic carpet, and then one was like a little bit more advanced. So we started off on the little one. Now this magic carpet was way bigger than the one that we had in Maine, so there was a little bit of a learning curve there. But once again, my 6-year-old was doing great. She progressed through the easy magic carpet. We moved on to the bigger magic carpet, and by the end of the day, her and I were going up on the chairlift and doing those green slopes from maybe not from the top, but
Awesome.
definitely the easier green slopes off the chairlift. So it was a proud dad moment for me. I was super
Oh, for
excited
sure.
to be able to do that. Super excited for her, see her having fun there. It's a little bit terrifying because you have like no control over like what's happening. Once she starts skiing down that mountain, she's in control, and there's really nothing I can do to stop that. I kept asking her like, "Do you feel like you're in control? Do you feel like you can stop or turn when you need to?" And it got to the point where she was like, "Yes, Dad. You've asked me that about 5 times. I'm in control." So she was doing great, and she seemed to be having a lot of fun. So we're reaching that next step, being able to ski down those green slopes with the kiddos. It's
Yeah.
pretty exciting, and I was having a lot of fun. I think we actually have another weekend planned, probably next weekend. I think. To go up again. So gonna keep doing that skiing, keep getting them used to that, and I think it's really gonna be a good time finishing out this year, and then as we move into next year as well. So
Yeah.
it's all pretty cool.
That's awesome. And I can imagine the some of those neuroses when your daughter is skiing down the mountain, and you're right, she's the one that's in control there. You're no longer in control, and I'm looking forward to, in some ways, some aspects of that. I can definitely see
Mm-hmm.
myself in your shoes, in a couple of years with our 4.5 year
Oh
old,
yeah.
going down those slopes and being in a similar situation.
It's
How big is Lost Valley and Pat's Peak, like, in comparison to, let's say, like Gunstock and Loon, and
yeah.
compared to some of the mountains I know. What's the size that you're looking at with those?
So Lost Valley up in Maine is not very big. It's probably, obviously, Bradford ski
Yeah.
area around where we grew up. As far as like vertical height, it's probably pretty comparable to Bradford, but it is much steeper. So they do have like
Okay.
Bradford. I feel like it says like, oh, they have intermediate terrain or advanced terrain, but really everything is like the level of like a green in any other mountain. Whereas
Yeah.
Lost Valley, they do have expert level steeps and blue intermediates, but they're just much shorter, right? So it
Yeah.
is a little bit bigger in that regard. I think the vertical is still pretty small, like 300 vertical feet or something like that.
Yeah.
Pat's Peak is bigger for sure, probably more comparable to something like Gunstock. I don't think it has quite the same vertical. I want to say it's like 900, where Gunstock I think is like 1500 or something like that.
Oh, okay.
So Gunstock would still be considered bigger, but at the same time, right, it still has that. It's certainly a bigger mountain feel. Your runs are a little bit longer, and really for the kiddos, it's perfect for them because they have the opportunity to get to grow, go on some slightly bigger runs, but not quite as big as what you would be doing in like let's say the White Mountains, right? So
Yeah.
that was pretty good for us, and certainly would recommend to others as well. I feel like they had a really good. I mean, we had super good coverage too, which was helpful. It had snowed like the day before,
Oh,
so
yeah,
we
for
had
sure.
like 5 inches of fresh powder on, so which is pretty great. But Mike, what have you been up to as far as outdoor endeavors for you guys?
Yeah, you started this off by saying that winter is still upon you guys up in the north, but down here, spring is now kind of upon us
Oh,
down in Georgia. I know that that sounds kind of crazy, but it really is. I mean, I say that the temperature fluctuates so much between like the mornings and then the highs in the afternoon.
mm-hmm.
And on top of that, like from day to day and from week to week, that changes and fluctuates a lot too. So like earlier on this week, we had some days that were in like the 30s,
Mm-hmm.
highs in like the lower 40s. But last week we had a day where the high was 75.
Wow.
So I mean, it goes back and forth over the course of a week. We'll have some weather that's like super warm and people are outside in like shorts and t-shirts and people are going on like runs and jogs and stuff like
Wow.
that out through our neighborhood, and it's like quite literally lower 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And then you turn around and you've got another day where you're in like the mid to low 20s in the mornings, and now the high's not getting up past like the upper 30s or lower 40s. So
Yeah.
it really is it's hard to dress for one. It's even harder to dress your kids for two, and it does kind of open up the door for the start of some kind of spring activities and things like that. I mean, as listeners who have been listening along to the podcast know, I teach out of school, and so we're in the midst of like our spring sports season now. Lacrosse is getting going, track and field is getting going.
Mm-hmm.
So we're already in the midst of some of that like spring season. For me, in terms of some of the stuff that I've been able to do, I did get out to the driving range, which was really
Nice.
nice. I'm getting more and more competent at golf. And even just recently, I was not competent, and so
Yeah.
I'm getting to the point where I'm getting a little bit more and more competent. And I'm doing that. I've got a driving range that's maybe like 10 to 15 minutes from the house, and
Nice.
so I'll go there with a couple of irons and like a driver and just work on my swing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a very like I like having my progression that I go through when it comes to stepping up to the tee or stepping up to the ball, and
Mm-hmm.
I like kind of like having these things to work on. It's one of those sports that kind of like outdoor sports, kind of like fishing and hunting. It's something that you can do for a lifetime,
Mm-hmm.
and so I like that about golf. And I'm not very good, but I like being able to kind of work with those skills, and so I've been able to do that. Have done a little bit of fishing. I've got like a couple of these spots that are along the Chattahoochee River. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't been able to get up to any of the lakes like Lake Lanier or Lake Kiwi, to be able to get some lake fishing in.
Right.
But I've been able to get a couple of lines into the Chattahoochee. I've yet to catch anything in the Chattahoochee. But I've talked with a couple of people, and I think I know where some of my tactics are going awry. More on that later on in the episode. A little teaser there. Um, but I've been enjoying the fact that I've been able to get the line into the Chattahoochee. It
Hmm.
was a goal of mine for a couple of years, and so I've been able to kind of cross that off the list. Speaking of which, one really big goal of mine, especially as we've been doing this podcast, has been to get my hunting license. So that I can enjoy some of the hunting, both down here in Georgia as well as up in New England, as well as those that listen to the last Tally Ho recap of that trip back in 2012 or
Hmm.
2013. Um, I got my hunting license, and that was a really big step for me. It took
Nice.
I finished the hunter safety course. I applied for and got my license through the Georgia Outdoors, and so I am now a licensed hunter in the state of Georgia, which
Nice.
is really great to be able to say. And so that's been since our last episode as well. I've gotten that taken care of, and it's kind of opening. But what I like about it a lot is that it kind of lets me look forward to it and lets me kind of
Uh-huh.
like think and plan and strategize, and so I'm really excited about what that's going to mean, kind of moving down the road, because I do now have my hunting license, Pat. I know that it's something that you've been wanting for me to get for a while now, and
Yes.
so I've been able to take that plunge. I finished the course. I got myself the hunting license, and so we'll go from there. And I'm excited for some of the future outdoor endeavors that I'll be able to do with that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm excited too. I'm excited to, pick your brain or bounce things off you once you start getting into this, give you all
Yep.
the tips and tricks and kind of help you along the way. I'm very excited
Hmm.
for this. So I think it's going to be a fun year as far as hunting is concerned.
Hmm. Hmm.
But um, as we speak about hunting for this year, I think it's also good to look back and do a little bit of a recap on how this fall season went as well. So that's what this episode's all about, is that 2025 fall recap. So I think this is as good as time as any is to hit that up. So
Yep.
on to the 2025 fall recap. So I hunted in Massachusetts this year. I did have a New Hampshire license, but I didn't end up being able to make it over to New Hampshire, even though it's about a mile away. But due to the fact that we had a whole bunch of like family trips going on this year, like we took a trip down to see you guys last year. We took a trip down to see my sister-in-law in New Jersey. I only ended up having about 3.5 hunting days that I could like schedule out as far as what I was planning on doing. So that obviously makes things a little bit tricky. So I basically decided, I'd do a half day in October because October is, starting, deer activity starting to pick up, but it's not like super as crazy as it is in like November. I do 3 days in November across the first 3 weeks. And then usually in December, I'm able to pick up one weekend day where I can get at least a half day, sometimes a full day in the woods. And I was able to do that this year as well. So a total of 4.5 days in the woods was what I managed to be able to make happen, which was a little bit less than usual. Usually I can get closer to like 5.5 days, sometimes even 6. But you got to work with what you got, and it ended up being decent as far as what I was experiencing in the woods as well. So the plan going into the season, um, which I think we discussed a little bit on one of our previous podcasts, was based on what I saw last year, right? So we have uh, all sorts of trail cameras in the woods taking pictures of these deer as they walk through. And based on what I saw last year, yeah, I was looking to get a little bit more information on the area kind of closest to the marsh. Um, looking at getting closer to that marsh area in order to potentially see some good activity. The reason for that is because when I was there last year, there was a lot of really good sign around that mid November time frame, right? So I had walked through there during a scouting session in the middle of the season and saw a lot of good scrapes on the ground. So I was hoping maybe if I hunted in that area around that time frame, we'd have some decent luck. And the other thing that I had noticed about this marsh area is that both for last year, 2025, and for 2024, it was really like heavily drought conditions in the area. So there's much less water in that marsh than there usually is in years past. So I think last year, the year before, the deer were using that area a lot more because there was less water. It was easier for them to walk through there, but still maintain the same amount of cover as they were seeing previously. So these were kind of the ideas that I was having as we moved into the hunting season. I didn't have any uh, camera data in this area yet. I did put up a camera in order to get some more data for the following year, but none of that information was back to me yet. So we're still looking to get that information in and try and consolidate that. So I was kind of going in blind to this deeper marsh spot that looked really good as far as the scouting that I had seen. Um, still going to make use of spots based on the wind. Because basically the wind is what is going to drive these deer to go to specific areas. So just because this spot looks good, I was going to try and minimize, like only hunt it when the wind was good for it as well. So that was something that was coming into effect as well there.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense, and I'm so intrigued by some of some of these factors that can take um, an otherwise not so good spot and make it suddenly very advantageous, and vice versa, right? The conditions are so important in setting that up. And there are similarities with fishing, but I think that it's perhaps even more so when it comes to hunting, because there's factors of the wind that you need to take into consideration, and there's factors of the water sources, and there's factors of the weather, and there's factors of the senses of the animal that you
Mm-hmm.
need to take into consideration that aren't necessarily there for fishing. So what and of course these are some of your earlier outings that you're listing off here. I'm curious, Pat, what are some of the biggest differences that you see in terms of earlier season hunting, and what are some of the things that you're taking into consideration? Specifically, like what are some of the things that you're taking into consideration differently in the earlier part of the season than you would in the later part of the season?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. In the earlier part of the season, the deer are going to be more patternable, right? So generally, as you move through the summer, the deer are on kind of like a summer pattern, right? They're going to be going to the food at certain times. They're going to be coming away from the food and going back to bed at certain times. Um, Generally, through the summer, all the bucks are kind of together. They're in their bachelor groups. All the does are kind of together. They're kind of hanging out separate from one another. As you get closer to the rut, generally speaking, up in the New England area, that rut tends to be like the first and second week of November. It's kind of a bell curve, right? Your activity goes up until the rut, when the rut being the peak of that bell curve, and then falls back down on the other side. So as you move closer to that like first and second week of November, you're gonna see more deer activity, and the deer are gonna start chasing those does a lot more too. So they're gonna kind of shift from that pattern that they were on during the summer, that bed to feed, moving from there, walking through the woods looking for areas for them to eat. They're going to be more interested in those does as well as you move out from October into that November timeframe. Now, I was planning on hunting. There's a couple different strategies as far as the early season. one strategy would be if you're hunting in like the beginning of the season, right? Like so early October. In the case of New Hampshire, it would be even into September. Would be trying to figure out what that pattern is before it changes, and then hunt the deer according to that pattern. So
Right.
figure out where they're bedding, where they're generally liking to eat. Go to one of those places and try and track them down. As you move closer to the end of October, those deer are starting to chase those does a little bit more. They're going to be a little bit more active in a rut type situation. So those patterns are going to kind of blow up, and they're not going to be as useful anymore. So you're going to have to start hunting them a little bit more like you would for the rut. So you're going to look for your does. You're going to look for doe areas where the does are spending a lot of their time, and try and track down the bucks that way. Or if you're just looking for a doe, I mean, ultimately looking for those does are going to be doing kind of similar things too. They're going to be checking the scrapes for bucks that are in the area. They're also going to be hanging around food sources as well, kind of going around about their business. So those are kind of some of those things that you're thinking about. I mean, all throughout the season, but in the early season, it's really kind of that transition from your summer pattern over to kind of that rut pattern.
Got it. Got it. That makes sense. And so I guess I'm learning that a lot of the strategy that goes into it revolves around the rut. And that's not just in order to try and time it so that you're in the woods during the rut.
Mm-hmm.
It's there's a lot more that kind of goes into strategizing around that time period, and the animals are doing different things before, during, and after
Mm-hmm.
that you can then kind of use to your advantage. So
Yep.
that's something that I'm learning here. Again, very much a novice, but I'm starting to piece these things together.
Yeah,
So
no, exactly, and that's exactly right. So for this October, I usually can have like one full day in the woods in October. This year, I was only gonna have a half day. So I took off from work around lunchtime, made my way towards the woods to set up my tree stand and then hang out in the tree for the latter portion of the day. Um, I went to the same place I did in when I had my success in 2022. It's this area that's kind of on a peninsula, but also kind of like right towards the marsh as well. Um, the wind was moving from the southwest, so blowing from the southwest. So I planned on approaching from the northeast. So it was like the opposite corners. That way, if my wind, if the wind would be blowing my scent away from where I was headed, the advantage there being there'd be a little bit less of my scent in that area. So that would be beneficial for me sitting in that tree stand. Um, However, when I was walking in, and I took a more northerly route than I usually do, that was because of the wind. I wanted to try and push my scent kind of as far away from the tree I was going to set up in as I could. But I definitely heard some like kind of crashing and jumping going on in the marsh area as I walked in, which I'm pretty sure was a deer moving out of there because he smelled me, which makes sense, right? My wind was blowing basically right into that marsh area as I was approaching. So if there was a deer in there, he
yeah,
would have smelled me and would have gotten out of there. But so, moving into my stand, I set up the stand, got everything squared away, but didn't end up seeing anything that night. Um, I had previously thought the deer were bedding kind of on the southern side, which is ultimately why I ended up walking in that way. But in this instance, they were certainly bedding in the north, and I think I ended up spooking him as I was walking in. So I think next time, if I'm hunting that area, I'll probably try walking in with a more southerly route. That way, if even on the same wind, if it's blowing towards the north, there's a little bit more space between myself and those deer to potentially not blow them out of there, and then maybe as the evening gets a little bit later, those deer are still sticking around, might be able to coax them a little bit closer to my stand. So that's the plan if we end up hunting that stand again next year. So I mean, I guess in some ways it was like, obviously what I can't consider it a success. I blew out that deer. I blew out their deer getting to the stand. But at the same time, I know there was a deer there, so I mean that's good. and I now have a bit more of a better strategy getting into that area. So I think that those are like small victories, I guess, as we move
Yeah.
into the latter or the remainder of the season and potentially into next season as well.
Yeah. Now, in terms of while you're in the midst of a season, in terms of those tactical changes and things that you can adapt to on the fly, or maybe more so on kind of like a day-to-day basis, in addition to changing your approach, which I'm learning is based off of kind of the wind, right? You want to make sure, and I would imagine that it more often than not would be advantageous to be walking into the wind when you're walking towards your stand. That way, the wind is kind of blowing past you and past where it is that you are hoping the deer are going to be coming from. But what other changes do you make tactically while you're in the midst of the season, to give yourself the best chance as possible once you're in the stand beyond those approaches?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is if you see something, trying to make an adjustment based on what you're seeing, or in some instances hearing, right? So in this case, right, that I indicated previously, I approached from the north. There was a deer in the north. He blew, right? So in I can use that information for the next time I hunt that stand. If we're seeing a southwest wind and I'm hunting that area again, if I approach from the south and the deer is still in the same location, then maybe I won't blow him out that time.
Mm-hmm.
And another option, right, given the same information, would be, well, I know there was a deer towards the north. Maybe I move my stand to the north where that deer was, and then approach, and then
Mm-hmm.
get a little bit closer to where I heard this deer, and then approach from the south. And then instead of
Yeah.
having to, one, you have an additional advantage because you're coming from a more advantageous approach. But two, you've moved your stand a little bit closer to that deer, so he doesn't have to move quite as far before you get an opportunity. Now, there's a risk in setting that stand up so close to the deer as well. You could blow him out getting your stand set up. But, it's these
Right.
risks and rewards that you're weighing on a constant basis to try and determine what's the best option for you and what's going to give you the best chance to see that deer.
Yeah, I'm now thinking like if the wind had been in the opposite direction and you had come from the opposite side, you would have been in a position to be able to get yourself into the stand without scaring the deer,
Mm-hmm.
and then you might have had a chance at them making their way back towards your stand, the same stand, the same location, same tree, but with the opposite wind. So you can use that moving forward as well. So that
Yeah,
definitely makes sense.
exactly. So those are some of the things that you weigh, and then every decision has its pros and cons, right? Do you take the
Hmm.
southern approach, which is going to take longer, or potentially blow your wind in a different direction, or do you take the northern approach where you think it's gonna be more advantageous, but you're maybe walking closer to where the deer are bedded, right? Those are kind of the in this instance the things that I was thinking of when I was making that approach. Um,
Yeah, for
but
sure.
but moving out of October, we start moving into the November time frame. So my first sit in November was the first week in November. Obviously, a great time to be in the deer woods. Deer are starting to get a little bit rut crazy and move through. Their activity is starting to peak, so it's one of the best times to be in the woods. For this sit, I had an early morning sit. I was planning on going to a place that I just call like the early deer spot. I call it that because generally all my camera pictures have been from kind of earlier in the season. That would include like early portion of November, but as it moves into like the second and third week in November, generally I haven't seen any deer on my trail cameras at that point. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that this area has decent cover, but once the foliage kind of falls off the trees, there's not as much cover, and I don't think the deer like to hang around there as much. They use it more as like a
Right.
area that they kind of walk through. So I hunted in the saddle because I figured I wasn't going to set up a tree stand there because I wasn't going to be coming back because the earlier part of the season had already passed. Sat in the saddle, had a slight southwest wind. Um, the wind was slightly southwest, not a slight wind, because it was actually a very, very windy day. We're talking like 20 mile an hour, like constant wind with like gusts up into the 40 mile an hour range.
Wow.
So it was like it was whipping all day, which to some degree is okay. I mean, obviously it's a little cold in the stand. You're gonna be a little bit freezing, um, but there are some advantages to that too, and I can talk to that in a bit. But ultimately, my morning I didn't end up seeing anything. No deer were out in the morning. I think the wind was just a little bit too much, too windy for them. And wind is an
Yeah.
interesting thing, right? Because it's obviously noisy, right? It takes up a lot of, you can't really hear a lot in the wind, but also like it blows. If there are any like scent molecules in the air, it blows them away really quickly too. So if you're a deer, and like everything in the woods is also moving, so it's like if you're a deer, your sight is kind of at a disadvantage. Your hearing is at a disadvantage, and your scent is at a disadvantage, right? So as a deer, you really can't move around as safely if you're in like a really
Hmm.
high wind situation. But if you're the hunter, that also starts to put things in your advantage. I mean, to some degree, it's a disadvantage, right? Because the deer aren't going to be moving around. But if you, as the hunter, you can move around safely without having the deer to be concerned about blowing out the deer, right? Because they can't
Right.
hear you, they
Hmm.
can't smell you, and they can't really. I mean, they could see you if you get on top of them, but any like little bit of movement could easily just be the wind blowing a tree versus like a person walking through, right? So using this information, I decided to scout around and see if there's any additional places I wanted to hunt, maybe future in the season. I was specifically looking for an area that would be good with a southwest wind in the afternoon, because most of my trail camera data and the spots I were have seen deer weren't great for afternoon sits with the southwest wind, which is ultimately the predominant wind in the area. So it was like great, the wind that's always happening in this area in the afternoon. I don't have a great spot for, so I was looking to try and
Yeah.
track that down. And I found an area. I walked around for a while, probably for like an hour and a half to 2 hours, and ended up finding an area that had a lot of acorns and a few small rubs, which was great because I hadn't seen that kind of sign in that area before. So I figured, I'll set up here. We'll see what happens. Maybe something will happen as we move into the evening. So I set my saddle up probably about 20 yards off the rub and probably about 40 yards off where those acorns were, where the deer, it looked like the deer were eating those acorns. And got myself squared away. Probably got in the stand around 1 or so, with a couple hours before the last light. So I'm sitting up there, and obviously it's still windy as all heck. 20 mile an hour, gusting, like my tree's like bending in there. It's it's pretty wild. But all of a sudden, as the sun starts to set and we're starting to get into that sunset time frame, the wind like totally dies down to the point where it's like now maybe 5 miles an hour, if that, and like sometimes like
Oh
totally
wow.
stopping. And I was like, ooh, if like this is the perfect time because it's been windy all day. The deer are going to need to get up on their feet, and this is the only
Yep. Uh-huh.
opportunity they'll have that advantage. And lo and behold,
Yeah.
I see a deer start moving its way out from the marsh. I see a deer jump like kind of over a log, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome because now I've already had this. I've had success, right? I've seen a deer, which is great because I've gone. Last year I saw a deer. The year before that I didn't end up seeing any deer. Um, so it was already a success at that point. And then the deer starts walking, meandering closer and munching on those acorns as he got closer to me. I was like, oh, this is perfect. So I stand up, I grab my bow, I'm starting to get ready, looking to figure out, is there going to be where I could take a shot if I needed to. So I identified a couple different shooting lanes. One was going to be like a 25-yard shot. Another was going to be like a 30-yard shot. So I'm standing, I'm waiting, I'm watching this deer. Look, pretty good sized deer. I did have a rack that I could see from like 60 yards out to the naked eye. Looked pretty good. I couldn't tell how many points, but definitely a rack that was outside of his ears. So at least like a 12-inch inside spread. So that was it definitely had 4 points. I think it probably had six. There's a chance that it had eight, but it was tough to tell from specifically where I was at that distance. So I'm getting excited. This deer is starting to walk up closer to me, and he gets to about 50 yards away and then stops and starts looking around. And I realize that the area that he's walking through, I had walked through with my
Oh
boots
my gosh.
like 2 hours ago. So my ground scent was all over that area when I was looking at those acorns and looking at which tree I wanted to try and set up in, because I didn't know what area the deer was going to be coming
Right.
from. So he catches my scent, looks around, and eventually just kind of takes a couple bounds back the way he came, and ends up walking away because he didn't like what he was smelling. So that deer got to
Yeah.
about 50 yards from me, never got inside of that, and never had really a clear shot at even with that. So not that I would take a 50-yard shot at a deer, but certainly not at last light with it being within cover as well. So an
Yeah.
exciting opportunity, but ultimately not something that ended up being a
Yeah.
success. So it was a little
Just
bit
outside of
bittersweet,
your
but
range. Yeah.
happy to get excited and seeing the deer as well.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. You're talking about um you're talking about this hunt for you, and the fact that this wind ended up leading to an advantageous situation for you, because once that wind did end up dying down, these animals need to go and eat.
Hmm.
They need to do all the things that are going to keep them alive, and so you knew that, and you were able to kind of put yourself into an advantageous position with that. I'm reminded of my fishing this past summer,
Hmm.
where there were these big storms that were rolling through up at Lake Kiwi at like the 2, 3 o'clock time period. And then as a result, I would go out in my kayak at the like 3:30, 4 o'clock time period, which you would never think would be a good time for fishing. But I kept catching fish because all of the boats had gone away once the storm had kind of cleared out. These fish were surface feeding and they wanted to
Hmm.
eat, and so I waited until kind of the storm had passed and the lake was calm again, and did a really similar thing. These fish need to eat. They're going to be surface feeding, and so I went out there and caught myself quite a few fish right after those storms had passed through. And so there's just a similarity, I think, there between some hunting and fishing, being able to use the weather to your advantage there right in the aftermath of it to be able to use that to your advantage.
Yeah, no, definitely. I totally agree, and that was definitely the key to my success in that instance, because that deer was probably not that far away from where I was walking, but because of the wind and really just the wind, he wasn't able to hear me or smell me like he normally would have. So that was pretty much the same. But moving into my second sit, so at this point, right, this would be like the second week in November. I head back to that deep marsh spot that I was hoping to get a good opportunity at. So this is the area that I had walked around in last year, but hadn't had an opportunity to get out there this year yet, because I was saving it for that second week in November, because that's where I had seen the time frame that I had seen all that sign the previous year. So I make my way out there. It is probably about 3/4 of a mile off like the main trail, like bushwhacking through the woods. So it takes some time to get out there. So I probably, yeah, it took a good while to walk my way out there with the tree stand. But I got out there, I got my tree stand set up, got sitting up there a couple, probably about 45 minutes before daylight. So that was great. Um, I get sitting there. I don't see anything as soon as light breaks, but during that AM sit, I saw two deer, probably at about 100 yards away, kind of jumping through some of the thick stuff. So it was good. I was seeing deer. My data is good. It was good. It was indicating that I was going to see some deer, and I did. So I was pretty happy about that. Generally speaking, I try and have different stands for the morning and the afternoon. So I got down, moved over to my afternoon spot, which was ultimately the place I had seen the deer the week previously. I was trying to milk
Yeah.
that stand for all it was worth, but didn't. And it was pretty cold. I think temps were kind of in the 20s, so it was pretty chilly that day. But I didn't end up. I was hoping as we got closer to the end of the day, the deer would get up to eat. I didn't end up seeing anything that afternoon. I did, however, see a whole bunch, or not see. I did hear a whole bunch of coyotes howling
Oh, wow.
right as I was getting down, though, kind of from the area that I was expecting the deer to come from. So I don't know if maybe those coyotes had moved their way into where the deer were previously and kind of moved them out, um,
Yeah.
and kept them from coming over to the area that I was in. It's a potential possibility. I can't say for sure that that's what happened, but I like to think that maybe if those coyotes weren't there, maybe the deer would have made their way towards me. But either way, it was kind of cool to hear those coyotes howling. I mean, it's always kind of an interesting thing. It's a little unnerving when you're in the woods in the dark and you got coyotes howling. That's probably not
Oh, yeah, for
that
sure.
far away from you. But generally speaking, they're going to be more scared of you than you should be of them. So it was something else, but I didn't end up seeing. I saw the deer in the morning, but didn't end up seeing anything in the afternoon, which would move me into my third November sit. The third one was the third week in November. I like to kind of space them out a week apart. That's for a couple different reasons. One, it allows me to maximize the time frame that I get to think about hunting. So when I when I finish the first week, I get to think
Yeah.
the entire week about where I'm going to set my next stand up and how I'm going to make that happen, which I enjoy. It also allows the woods to kind of get back to, I can't, anything that I mess up in the woods in 1 week, 7 days from then is going to be basically fixed, right? The deer, they may not totally forget, but they're not going to be thinking about something that happened a week ago and be super
Right.
concerned about it, especially during the rut. Now, generally speaking, I'm hunting on public land, so that's not to say that somebody else doesn't walk through the area and totally blow it up the day before I go out there, right? I have no real control over that, but at the same time, I like having that knowledge that yes, the last time I was in here was a week ago, so there's nothing that I did that messed up what these deer are doing. But we move into the third set, and this time I move back to that deep marsh spot again, same place I was the week earlier, and I don't see any deer, which was a bit of a bummer. But that it's hunting. You're not going to see deer every single sit, so
Right.
it was fine. You're moving into that third week in November. You still should see a decent amount of activity, but nothing in the morning. Um, the afternoon, however, I went back to that same spot where I had seen the deer previously and ended up seeing three deer. Two were kind of far out in the brush, kind of to my east, and I saw them kind of running up a hill and in some brushy cover. And another one was right along the marsh. I saw the deer jump right over a log. Saw it for a split second, but never was able to see it for much more than that. But that was really exciting for me to see that much deer activity in that time frame, kind
Yeah.
of indicating that this area that I've found is certainly an area that these deer like to hang out, or at least this year, liked to hang out during the rut. So definitely going to continue to look into that as we move into this season as well. Both times I saw the deer, they were too far away. The first two were probably at least 100 yards, might have even been further than that. The third
Right.
deer that jumped over the log was probably let's say 75, 80 yards. So certainly outside of bow range for sure. Not something I was going to be able to take a shot at. And I only saw them for kind of an instant, so it wasn't going to, nothing was going to really happen there.
Yeah. Now, I know you just mentioned the rut. What are the factors that lead to more historically successful hunting during that November time period? Is it the fact that the temperatures are getting right? Is it the fact that you're kind of transitioning from that fall into winter? Is it the weather? And then furthermore, is it true everywhere that like November is the right time to hunt, or dependent upon weather, does that kind of move around and change?
Yeah, so the rut is interesting, but mostly the thing that's initiating the rut is actually like the amount of daytime, right? So like the photo period, the amount of time that the
Huh,
sun
okay.
is in the sky, ultimately is what kind of triggers that rut activity. So regardless of the temperature or anything else, the rut's going to happen kind of around the same time frame because the sun is going to be in the sky for the same amount of time around that same period, right? So that's kind of what triggers
That
it,
is crazy.
right?
I never thought that that was the answer that you were going to say there, Pat. That's really, really interesting. And when you boil it down, not to get too like poetic or romantic with it, but like that is galactic. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about like the factor here is where the Earth is in its orbit around the sun, in terms of how long the sun is in the sky and where you are on the planet,
Mm-hmm.
like determining what the hunting is looking like
Mm-hmm.
for this particular animal while you're both in the woods. I mean, that's just so cool. I had no idea that it had to do with the amount of daylight.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So ultimately that's kind of what initiates the rut. Now the temperature is going to play an important role in that too, right? So if it's really hot during the peak of the rut, a lot of those deer are going to kind of lay low a lot of the time because they're not going to want to exert all of that energy when it's super hot out. They're going to run themselves ragged. The same reason that you and I don't want to go run a marathon when it's 90 degrees. These deer don't want to be
Right.
running all up and down the countryside when it's like 70 and they got their winter coats on, right? So the temperature, generally in the rut time frame, you're going to be looking for colder temperatures because that's going to be more advantageous for those deer to be getting up on their feet and moving around. They're going to need to get up in order to maintain that body heat, and that's when they're going to be moving around to try and find those does as well. And you talked
Yeah.
about the rut in different parts of the country, and at a lot of in the northern well, longitude, latitude. I don't know. The northern states, the rut tends to be relatively, consistent, right, from year to year, and from state to state. But as you move down south, and I don't necessarily know what the case for Georgia is, there are states that have kind of different ruts or multiple ruts, and it has to do with the deer herds that have been down there. They
Right.
in some instances they can rut into like the January time frame,
Okay.
which is wild when you think about areas in like the New England area or in the Midwest, where ultimately that November time frame is really where it's going to be peak for most of those states. So the southern
Yeah,
states are
that
kind
makes
of
sense.
on a slightly different schedule.
Yeah.
Specifics I can't really speak to because I don't have a
I'll have
lot
to
of
look into it.
experience. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would certainly
I get to
would.
look into it.
And you can get
Hmm.
pockets. I know I've heard of this and heard it in different podcasts where you can get pocket in the South have, one deer herd that goes into the rut in like November, and then another deer herd in a couple counties over that goes into their rut in like December. So you can almost like chase the rut in some of these states, in order
Wow.
to always be hunting within the rut. At least that's what I've heard. So
Super, super
something,
cool.
yeah, something to think about for sure.
Yep. Yet another factor to take into consideration.
Exactly. There's nothing but factors. Um, but that moves me into my at this point, right? I've sat through my 3 hunts in November, my half a hunt in October, and then at this point, I didn't know if I was going to be able to get out for an additional sit. I did manage to get out for one more day in December. and it was pretty cold. I decided to try and get a little bit closer to the marsh if I possibly could. The reason being there is that all the deer I was seeing were kind of right next to the marsh there. So I was trying to get a little bit closer, pull my saddle a little bit closer to that area. So I was setting up there. I did see some hunter lights walking in the swamp, kind of not adjacent, probably on the other side of the swamp, about a half a mile away. But it was kind of cool to see those lights going on over there, to see people getting into their tree stands. In the morning, I was in that deep marsh spot again. I did see kind of like a flash of movement within the marsh, which I'm gonna say was a deer, but I can't say for sure that it was.
Yeah.
It was a bit hard to confirm, but better than not seeing anything. But that was pretty much it for the morning sit. As far as the afternoon, I did have a similar idea for that spot. So this is the same spot I had been hunting, and I had seen those 3 deer previously. Similar idea to get a little bit closer to the marsh, closer to where that deer may have been bedded, so that there would be a little bit less space for him to travel before getting into that opportune moment for me. The tree that I found looked okay, but it was a little bit more exposed. It didn't have a lot of cover, which I think didn't necessarily help me. It might have been a little bit easy to spot. So ultimately I moved through the rest of the afternoon and didn't end up seeing anything there. So I think moving forward in that spot, I think I'll need to figure out what tree I want to be in and try and find that happy medium between, getting close to that bedding where that deer was, but having a little bit more cover for where my tree stand set up, so that I'm not kind of sticking out if if he can see me from where he's bedded. But that's kind of how my sits went. So in total, I didn't end up having any true success as far as harvesting a deer. But I did see 6 deer, so that was, more deer than I'd seen last year, which was good. I mean, I saw deer on almost all my sits, which was pretty exciting. I didn't end up being I wasn't able to take any shots or really get the bow back on anything, so that was a bit of a bummer.
Yeah.
I did hone in on a couple new spots, which is exciting. Specifically, that one where I saw a bunch of deer this year. So moving into the 2026 season, definitely want to take a look at that area. Maybe set up a trail cam in there. Determine when those deer are using that area to potentially gain a little bit more knowledge and a little bit more success as we move into 2026.
Yep. No, that makes sense. Now, and I realize that this might be a little bit of kind of like a teaser for some of our episodes that are still to come. But as you know, and at the top of the episode, I was talking about how I just got my hunting license. And so I am about as novice and as inexperienced as it gets. But I'm also really excited. And so I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here, Pat, a little bit. And ask you if there's 3 things that you think that I should take into consideration as I'm either starting into what's going to be a fall hunt, as I'm considering what my fall hunting is going to be looking like. What are 3 factors that you think are vitally important to take into consideration when it comes to fall hunting? And that can go anywhere from weather to wind. But what are 3 factors? And again, at the top of this, I started talking about how excited I am to start plotting and planning and start strategizing and looking at some of these factors and all. But what would be 3 factors just so that I can start daydreaming and brainstorming and thinking about this? What are 3 factors that you think are important to take into consideration when fall hunting?
Oh man. Well, there. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of factors. So if we're gonna talk specifically about a novice hunter that doesn't, so if it doesn't necessarily have an opportunity to get out in the woods and scout, because that's ultimately the thing that's going to give you the best chance of being successful, is getting into the woods and walking around and getting to know the lay of the land and being able to, see what those the topographical terrain looks like, as well as, seeing if you can see any of that deer sign. So I think that scouting is probably the most critical. Now, that gets a little bit tricky if you're
Yeah.
talking about hunting out of state, right? So if you're talking about hunting in Pennsylvania or hunting in, New England area, then that obviously you're not going to be able to get up here and scout frequently, if
Hmm.
if at all, right? So that kind of, I would say, leads into potentially, let's say, the second one, which would be like some sort of like mapping, like scouting via maps. Being able to look at
Hmm.
maps, take a look at what they look like, try to start identifying different terrain features, different areas that might be useful for you, or areas that you think might give you good success as you move into being able to get boots on the ground and being able to scout. I think that's ultimately things that are going to be really beneficial for you. I have a few different mapping apps that I use. I can obviously let you know what those are. Some of them are
Yeah.
free. Some of them you can pay for. You can go get as deep or or as shallow into this as you want. But I think ultimately, like mapping apps and being able to track your GPS and look at these mapping apps is probably the thing that has improved in hunting over the last 10 years, like the most drastically, and and I would say has the biggest impact on myself, as far as my confidence in the woods, knowing where I am, as well as being able to figure out new hunting spots or places where I think deer are going to be. Because I can now like look at a map, take a few different things into consideration, and put a pin on there, walk to that pin, and then like I would say 50% of the time there's some amount of deer sign there, which is crazy, because it's like you're talking about like hundreds or thousands of acres, and you've now narrowed it down to like a 50-yard section where a deer has at least been
Hmm.
there. It's pretty wild. And then I guess the third thing is just starting to figure out like your gear, like what you're gonna want, what you're gonna need to bring into the woods, what you're gonna want to have with you, figuring out what you need, what you don't need, things like that.
Yeah.
Would
Hmm.
would be beneficial, I think, and obviously we could set up an entire podcast, an episode on any of these three. So I mean, I guess that's
Yeah.
the good news. We got plenty of content here. I think
Lots of
we
material.
have, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have, right. We've talked about
Yeah.
scouting. We've
Hmm.
talked about the terrain. We've talked about the gear. But I think we could definitely do something around, more novice, or more specific in your case, what what you want
Yeah.
to do, and
Yeah.
how
Exactly.
you're going to handle this new adventure, and how you're going
Yeah.
to continue to grow and learn, and to the point of potentially having some success in this. So I'm really excited, Mike.
Yeah.
I can't tell you enough
Yeah.
how excited I am to start
Yeah.
game planning with you for where we're gonna hunt and how we're gonna do it. So.
Yeah, I'm really jazzed up about it too, and I was awarded for like from my teaching job for
Mhm.
the school that I work with, um, and again, if you're joining from the required reading podcast, welcome first of all, but also you might have heard me talk a little bit about some of the writing and stuff that I do, and at my school, I have this really awesome opportunity. I was awarded a fellowship program that is going to let me take a sabbatical term to go and kind of travel and work on my writing. And it's kind of like a 3 year period that I'm awarded this fellowship for. And I can take the term anytime over the course of those 3 years. And for a number of reasons, I'm going to be waiting until the third year, the spring term of that third year, before I start into the actual sabbatical term. And one of the things that I've found the most awesome about this experience of this fellowship program and of this sabbatical is being able to kind of like daydream and think about it, and think about what it is that I'm going to be doing and where it
Mm-hmm.
is that I'm going to be traveling and how it is that I'm going to be spending that time and what it is specifically that I'm going to be writing and trying to get some things outlined beforehand in the years beforehand so that I'm ready to go. Talking with my agent about some of the books that he's going to want me writing and he's going to want me working on, and there's just the possibilities are kind of endless. And I'm finding that I'm feeling the same way about hunting. That now that I have my hunting license, I'm
Uh-huh.
starting to get really jazzed up about like scouting out an area and getting myself out there in the woods to be able to do some scouting and looking at the maps and looking at the terrain and thinking about the gear that it is that I'm going to be bringing out there. And I mean, I getting my bow sighted in
Mm-hmm.
and getting all that stuff squared away. These are all the things that I get to look forward to now that are out on the horizon because of the fact that I've started kind of going down this route. So I'm really excited about it too. It's gonna be kind of an adventure, and thanks for listening at home to to me kind of starting off on this adventure. And you're right, Pat. I think we've got more material here as well as we're looking into and looking ahead into some of these things that we've got. So stick around and keep listening because we've got a lot more to come in that regard.
Oh yeah, for sure, Mike. I spend an unhealthy amount of time thinking about what different hunting scenarios. Like when I fall asleep at night, it's usually because I'm thinking of like, okay, with this wind in this stand, how do I want to approach this, and where do I think the deer are going to be coming from? And I just do that for,
uh,
and
yeah,
to get to that granular detail, and sometimes that's what you need in order to be successful. But then ultimately you walk your way through all these things, and then you get to the season, and you can execute on that game plan, and you can potentially have success, which is, I mean, ultimately it comes down to what the deer does, but you can put yourself in a situation where you're at least seeing deer, and once you start seeing deer on on a more regular basis, that's where you can start having that success. So it's
yeah, sure.
it's pretty exciting for sure. uh, but Mike, I think we've done a pretty good job here recapping some of our activities through this fall. I know that obviously my hunting season wasn't a success in the traditional way, but I'm excited that I got a new
Hmm.
spot lined up where I was seeing a lot of deer this past year, and I'm excited to see what happens in the 2026 season. But Mike, what are your closing thoughts here? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I'm the hearing you talk about how you're laying in bed thinking about like these different wins and the granular level. That's what I do when I'm thinking of the books that I'm writing and the stories that I'm telling, and I'm plotting out like the different beats of a story and what different chapters are going to be looking like. Like quite literally last night I was up at like 4:30 in the morning unable to fall asleep because I had like a plot hole that I was trying to work through. And
Mm-hmm.
like I think about it in the exact same way, Pat. And so what I'm hearing is that it's something that you're super passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are that passionate about these things, I mean, it's what it is that makes you like do a podcast on it, which makes you the perfect host for this podcast. But it's also one of those things that like that's in your blood. It's part of who you are. And I can't wait to take these next steps kind of along that journey alongside you because I love talking with people that are passionate about anything.
Mm-hmm.
Right, I'll talk with anybody about anything. Let me just let me just clarify and just take a step back and say that. But especially if somebody is passionate about something, like I feed off of that, and I find it so contagious and so energizing. And so when it's something that I'm also passionate about when it comes to outdoor sports, and I think that this is I'm standing on the brink here of what's going to end up being these adventures that we've got unfurling in front of us,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm excited for it. So
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks, Mike. I appreciate that, and I think that we did a great job here. Covered the hunting season pretty good. I'm super excited for the next steps here, especially as we move into some of your learning about hunting and how we're gonna take that next step there. But I think we're gonna call it for this one. So if you haven't already, make sure you're following us, rate, review, all that good stuff. But until next time, get outside, have some fun out there. Thanks for listening to the East Coast Hunt, Fish, Hike podcast. If you have questions, comments, or have an idea for an episode, feel free to follow us and reach out over social media. Don't forget to rate, review, or tell your friends about the podcast. And until you hear from us again, get outside, have some fun out there.